Welcome, everybody, to episode 36 of Sports Shorts. And I'm very happy today to have as our guest Karen Brodkin, EVP of Content Strategy and Development and the co-head of WME Sports. Did I get the title right? Close enough?
Yeah, listen, it changes every day, Bobby. For today, I think you're close enough.
So, truth in advertising, Karen and I worked together for a long time in the Fox Sports days. And let's just say we were there in what some refer to as the halcyon days of Fox.
Or the wild, wild west, depending upon who you ask, right?
They were both good times and really interesting, but Karen left Fox to head over to the William Morris Endeavor Group. And so we've just sort of put out what your title is, but the way we like to start our program is just to allow our guests to talk a little about what their job is, broad brushstrokes, and maybe a little bit about, your particular path to getting to where you're at.
Sure. Well, Bobby, first of all, it's great to see you as always. My partner in crime for a lot of years, and I appreciate being invited to join today, and I'm really happy to do it. So my path, maybe I'll start with the end and then back up to the beginning. I joined Endeavor, well, what is now Endeavor. At the time, it was WME IMG. So it was in the fall of 2014, and WME, the Hollywood talent agency, had acquired the global sports entertainment management company IMG. And so at the time it was WME IMG. It has since been renamed Endeavor, which is now the public company. We had an IPO a little over a year ago. So we trade as EDR, and the company, the holding company, is known as Endeavor. And I actually work at the corporate level for Endeavor. It's interesting. I came here in 2014. I was recruited to join the company by Ari Emanuel is the chairman and president of Endeavor, Mark Shapiro, who previously was with the ESPN and worked as the CEO of Six Flags, Dick Clark Productions. And I have to tell you that it was a really amorphous role, as they described it. It was sort of, we want you to come over and oversee deal making, and we've got these two companies now, and we need an executive team to sort of bridge and build culture. But the one thing they really promised me at the time was, you will be part of the strategy, the team of strategists. You'll be in the room where it happens, not to be completely cliche, but we're building this thing brick by brick, from where we are now to where we want to go, and you're going to be part of that. And what I would tell you about my role is that's 100% true. I mean, I've never once, never once regretted my decision, even on the worst day, but what they promised me, they've delivered. So today, what I would tell you my job is that I really have two main operational leadership roles. I co-run WME Sports, which is where we house all of our athlete representation, on the court, off the court, marketing. So not just golf and tennis, which are legacy businesses of IMG, but an NFL representation business, an NBA representation business, an MLB representation business, coaching, content. We represent Peyton Manning's production company. We represent LeBron James's production company. So we have a soon to be announced WNBA business. We have an NIL business. So I sit across that. And then I also co-run our US media advisory business. So advising properties, professional sports leagues, teams, collegiate conferences, on their media rights. And that does include a handful of international properties like Wimbledon and Roland Garros and a handful of others. So those are my two main jobs. And then I still have a kind of a corporate strategist role, working for Mark on different sort of what I'd call strategy projects across Endeavor. How I got there?
Yeah, how did you
I'll
get
try to
there?
do this really quick. I mean, I started, obviously, apropos to the audience today, I started as a lawyer, went to work at a big corporate law firm out of law school, Paul Hastings, in Los Angeles. left Paul Hastings after a few years. Really liked it, but knew I didn't want to be a partner at a firm. If I was going to be a partner at a firm, I really liked Paul Hastings. So I just want to be clear, no disrespect at all to any big firms. And went to an entertainment, boutique entertainment firm, decided I would try my hat at entertainment. I worked on both the talent side of entertainment as well as what I'd call like the studio, production company, media company side. And then a job opened up at Fox Sports. And I grew up in a really sports oriented family. My dad was an athlete, and everyone in my family were huge sports fans. So I thought, wow, that job has my name written all over it. Bobby, of course, was already there. And I vied for the position. It took a handful of months, was hired, and frankly, took a major pay cut and came down in title from where I was at that point at my law firm. And as Bobby said, those were the halcyon days. So I moved up the food chain at Fox pretty quickly. And ultimately, I'd say my last, I don't know, Bobby, maybe 7-8 years, I kind of oversaw business and legal affairs for all the domestic sports assets for Fox. So the broadcast network that we launched, Fox Sports 1 and Fox Sports 2, the national cable networks, the Big Ten network, and then the 23 regional sports networks that were part of the Fox umbrella, and all the digital sports assets. And Bobby and I worked really closely together, as Bobby knows, which is the irony of my current role. He knows I couldn't stand talking to agents. I just found it so distasteful. So I said, Bobby, please, if I never have to speak to an agent, if you help me here, I will be so thankful forever and ever. And Bobby, don't you kind of laugh about that today, given the fact that I spend all day, every day surrounded by the people that I just couldn't handle getting on the phone with?
Well, that's the interesting question, because now you've brought to the fore one of my key questions for you, is being on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
So you're sitting on the other side now, and one of the things you mentioned about representing certain properties and teams and stuff is now you're negotiating, quite often it would appear, with broadcast platforms.
Mm-hmm.
So it would seem to me that you go to a negotiation probably working with people that you worked with on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you have the bona fides so that it should, I would hope, cut through some of the dance that oftentimes happens in those relationships. You think that's true?
I do. I mean, listen, that's one of the things I use as a selling tool on my business development side when I'm signing clients is not only do you get the benefit of having been, we call it the buy side, right? There's the buy side and the sell side. There's the ones that write the checks and the ones that cash the checks. And now I'm on the side that takes the money, hopefully. But I spent a lot of years on the buy side, and I have a lot of respect for that side of the table. And I kind of pride myself on two things. One, sort of knowing what's important, generally speaking, top line to different media partners. And by the way, it's not one stop shop. I mean, every media partner is different. And I do pride myself on having an understanding of what makes them tick and, where their pain points are. And you can cut through a lot of nonsense and a lot of game playing there. I mean, the other thing I would tell you is, and this is true for all of us, when you switch sides of the table, you have to really hope that the years that you spent on the other side, you've built a reputation of being someone that's honest. Look, you're going to advocate hard for your side. At that, those years I was advocating very hard for Fox Sports, but I hope I developed a reputation of being fair, being reasoned, being honest, being straightforward, having integrity, because when you switch sides, it really does matter when you're negotiating against the very people that were either your colleagues or they were your partners. And when I was at Fox, we did a lot of deals where ESPN, CBS, NBC, Turner Sports, they were not necessarily always our competitors. Sometimes they were our partners on deals,
Sure.
So I have to say that there's a real value proposition to having spent those number of years in building not only the repertoire, the reputation, the relationship, but knowing how each side ticks has been very helpful. I will tell you, my first year here, I was like, holy, what? I'm not in Kansas anymore. Like, the sell side is so different than the buy side culturally. I will tell you now, today, nearly 7.5 years later, I wear my sales hat very proudly. I am now a full-blown seller.
So as part of this sort of move to the other side, and I know that you represent, as you've noted, you represent teams and leagues and whatnot, but you spend a lot of the time, I would feel comfortable saying, building the regional sport network business from the ground up. And now you're in a situation where the regional sports network that we grew up with is not so much the same thing because of the cord cutting and because of the change of what the bundle is and all of that. How does that new reality inform your advice to clients when they don't have that guaranteed audience anymore?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, it's one of those things where, when you say, God, why didn't I realize I was in such good shape when I was 30 years old? And that I feel like that from 10, 15 years ago. Like, we worked hard on these deals. Why didn't we realize that it was so much easier then than it is now? Because it is a lot harder now. I think I spend a lot of time advising my clients on the financial realities of the RSN business and the challenges and the headwinds that the RSNs do face from the traditional cable model. I also spend a lot of time advising, though, that there is still extraordinary value in live pro team rights. I mean, anybody that attaches the challenges to the business model and conflates that to the devaluation of live NBA games or MLB games, I really think they're missing the point. There's tremendous value in sports, and the viewership is still strong. I mean, there's article after article written about young people and they're not watching full games. They may not be, but they're still tuning in to watch sports in higher numbers than people are turning in to watch news and to necessarily watch non-scripted, game shows. So sports is still a really good buy. But I do spend a lot of time advising on how the business has changed, how there's opportunity, but you have to be nimble, how you have to learn and understand and appreciate the direct-to-consumer marketplace. And I have to say, I've just come through my third deal in the last 12 months with a pro team with Bally's. And it was bumpy. I'm not going to lie. Like, it wasn't a straight line. We got through it. And I have to say all of my teams did pretty well. But there was a real education process. And I do think it's really important to be eyes wide open. And you can't put your head in the ground and say, oh, there's no cord cutting. No, there's cord cutting, right? I mean, just obviously today, this very minute, when you and I are speaking, MLS announced their global deal with Apple, right? That no one would have thought that could happen 5 years ago, maybe not even 24 months ago. But that's the world we live in today. So you got to be nimble and you got to adapt. And that's how I advise my clients.
Well, I think part of the adapting is also, I think if we look back, it wasn't that many years ago that you were fighting for, on the RSN side, to just have the ability to stream an authenticated stream to your users. And that was like so much pushback. Now we're at the point now where it seems that the NBA has certainly given some sort of broader streaming rights to some teams. But I don't think we're at a point yet where you can just flip a switch direct to consumer. We're sort of in this middle ground between maintaining the deals that you have with the RSNs, with the MVPDs, and trying to carve out some streaming rights. Where do you find the most pushback on that sort of hybrid model?
Um, I don't think there's pushback in the hybrid model. I think where the pushback lives is who's going to be the gatekeeper, right? Are you going to do a deal with, and I don't want to single out Bally's because I think the NBC Sports Net RSNs and the AT&T Root Sports ones, they're all sort of in the same business structure as is Nesson. And yes, the question is, are they going to be the gatekeeper and control both the linear distribution through the traditional linear distributors and then do the direct to consumer, which obviously Bally's has announced that they're launching their direct to consumer unauthenticated product? Or as a property, are you going to split your rights and try to do some on linear and some on D2C? That's where the pushback is. That's where the push pull is, because in the RSN world, the traditional RSN owners want to control the whole pot, and then they want to control the negotiations with the distributors and how the D2C is launched. That we'll see if that works, right? We'll see if that works in the very near term with Bally's and some of the others. I actually think, to your point, Bobby, like the hybrid model of it's not cold turkey necessarily. You don't all of a sudden turn your head away from linear distribution and say, we're going 100% direct to consumer, especially in that RSN model. I think that the future is in the hybrid. It's in not one size fits all. I mean, MFNs have to go by the wayside in the cable satellite world. I think I don't want to speak for Charter and Spectrum and Cox and Comcast and DirecTV, but I can tell you in the conversations that I've had on behalf of my clients with all of those distributors, they're not turning away from live sports and live regional sports. They just want a different business model. And I think there is a scenario where you could frame a business model that works for them and have a side-by-side direct to consumer product. And I think that's where the health is going to be in the RSN world.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I've been asked a lot about that as well. And I kept saying, look, home team sports, people love to see it. And, and a direct to consumer model, are you willing to bridge that delta between wasn't
that the old tagline, home teams, Fox Sports?
Exactly. But that's really what it's about. It's about your local team. You've had the leagues that have provided these products where you can get all the NBA games, all the NHL games, all the MLB games, but we really want to see our home team play. I mean, I think that's the real fan value proposition, is seeing your home team and getting really involved with them. So as we're looking at this, it's still, people want to have it, but if you're paying $1.22 to your cable provider, not even knowing about it, and now direct to consumer, they may ask you to pay $5 or $6 or $8. I mean, my feeling is that the people that were buying the bundle, that getting rid of it, are happy to pay that and cover that delta. But I guess we're just at the start of that process as well.
Well, I mean, listen, I think what we found over, let's call it the last 24 to 36 months, is people will find the programming they want to find, right? I mean, you don't have to be, a Hollywood talent agent to know that some of the best scripted and non-scripted programming, award-winning programming, is sitting on the streamers, on Netflix, on Hulu, on Disney Plus, on ESPN Plus, Peacock, on down the line. And people are finding it and they're watching it and they're talking about it. And, when for years, like the so-called water cooler chat about Lost or The West Wing or fill in the blank on your show, now those shows are on Netflix, those shows are on Hulu, or, fill in the blank. And people are finding them. And the numbers are reflective. The ESPN Plus numbers, I mean, the people will find the programming. So this utter fear that if you get out of the bundle, that no one will find you, and the grandmother who just pays her cable bill. I mean, I just think that that's a very old-fashioned way of thinking. people are engaged in sports. They will find the games. Okay. Fans will find the games. And I have to tell you, there's a lot of not just tech, but, private equity or other types of owners in professional sports that are big believers in that and are prepared to be a little, and to say disruption has a negative connotation, it's not as much disruption as just reimagining the model and adapting to the realities of the business that we're in and servicing our fan base. And some leagues have been faster to adapt than others. I mean, we'll see. We'll see how this deal with MLS and Apple works out. We'll see what happens in the next round of negotiations with the NBA. We saw what happened in the last round of negotiations with baseball and the NHL. And both of those leagues, very traditional leagues, found a way to put some games on streaming platforms, and people found them.
And let's look at, something I predicted when I was interviewed at an SLA conference many years ago in Denver. I said, when the next NFL rights deals comes up, Amazon's going to be a player. And lo and behold, they have the Thursday Night Football package, which will hopefully be a stable signal that 15 million people can see if they can get, Sunday numbers. But it's interesting because we've had so much talk, and I think what you said about people finding the programming, it's interesting to me that Amazon, which I always thought would be a likely player for a variety of reasons, made a big step getting into football. But the Netflix crowd that said we will never be in sports just got F1, right?
Well, I mean, I think you first of all, never say never.
Yeah.
And I think what obviously, I mean, Netflix has seen really great pickup on Drive to Survive. And I think they're engaging a really active F1 audience. They're helping to build not only the brand, but the sport. And I think it's sort of fits nicely in to the Netflix narrative. Now, do I necessarily take that to mean that Netflix is going to bid on NASCAR? Like, I don't necessarily make those kind of major assumptions. I think you have to be strategic, and you have to really understand the buyers and understand what makes the most sense for their business. Amazon has been very active in certain international markets because it's really important to their business goals in those international markets. Again, and Apple has a different narrative, and on down the line. But I never say never.
Yeah, I know. I'm just Reed Hastings said never, but I guess he can change too. But what's really interesting is we're talking about all of these changes and how different platforms are being used and how delivery of the content, which is still, I think everybody's going to agree, very valuable content. And just as an anecdotal aside, it was only 10 years ago that you said to me and Kai, one of our other colleagues, you said, hey, any deals, I've just been told that any deals we do moving forward, we have to be able to flip everything to an OTT environment. And we both went, what the F is OTT? And now here we are, direct to consumers, the phrase of the day, because we're dealing with younger people who, having grown up in a native digital environment, they want to use their devices to get whatever content is. And I think with the age advancing of most sports viewers, that you really need to get to your potential customer in the means by which they consume content. So it's really interesting to see in a relatively short period how things have changed so dramatically.
Yeah,
but
I mean, listen, we didn't think 5 years, I don't know, let's use 10 years ago. We weren't sure brands were going to ever learn and understand the digital space. And now we do. I mean, I'm going to flip the script a little bit to my athlete side of the business. We do, extraordinary deals, multi-7-figure deals with major endemic sports spenders that are really guided by social numbers and digital numbers, right? Not by ratings, not by traditional rating points in games, but I mean, a lot of this is driven on the athlete side, but social engagement, social content, how much content they're pushing out, how big is their audience, how engaged they are. I mean, we've just seen a major shift in the last few years at an incredibly accelerated pace compared to the last 20. And I scare myself when I say that, because I have been in this business, more than 20 years. And the movement that I've seen in the last 3 years eclipses what I saw in the first 17.
Exactly. We're running deep, and you and I could talk forever, but I do want to hit on one other issue, and that's with respect to collegiate athletes and name, image, and likeness rights. And I was just wondering what you folks are doing, if anything, in that space right now.
Our NIL strategy, which is, like everybody's 10 months old, is very aligned with our pro sports strategy, to be honest, where we are signing student athletes who, for really two primary reasons. Either they are an athlete that we have scouted that we believe will be a prolific professional player, whether that's football, basketball, WNBA, tennis, golf, baseball, or they have a very significant sort of marketing position. And we've signed athletes for both reasons. So I'll give you an example. We signed Chet Holmgren, who is a projected their top NBA draft pick next week out of Gonzaga. We signed him early in his freshman year at Gonzaga. And Chet, we knew Chet was going to be a prolific NBA player. We knew that then, we know it now. And so we took Chet and we built a whole sort of marketing plan around him. And now we have transitioned Chet to our NBA representation business. On the flip side, we signed a gymnast from LSU, Olivia Dunn, who we've done, I would tell you well over $2.5, $3 million worth of deals for, because she has a really significant social following. She's a digital influencer. And brands really want to be part of the Livy Dunn halo. So those are the two primary reasons that we have signed. Now we're not a clearinghouse. We'll probably never represent hundreds of NIL student athletes. We're going to really try to represent the best of the best, which is how we look at our pro representation business. But I would tell you, in the first 10 months, we've had a really good run on basketball, football. We signed a golfer out of the University of Texas who just went pro last week, Cole Hammer. So we're really excited about that. But look, we walked before we ran. We were circumspect, and we're going to continue to do so. But we really see NIL as an opportunity for us to get to work with these young men and women early in their career and really give them what we call like long-term brand relevance and to be honest, hopefully generational wealth.
Well, that's great. But I would be remiss if I didn't quickly pivot, although I said I would never use that word after COVID. But in 9 days, we'll be celebrating the 50th anniversary of Title IX. Mm-hmm. Pretty important work. And recently, for our audience, all saw it on the cover of Sports Business Journal, where you and your partner in crime, Hillary Mandel, for running.
Only two women doing this in the business together.
So, Title IX had a big impact, but it's not just on the field. It's women's role in the sports business. And you've been at the forefront for a long time. Do you see that ceiling finally opening up, or you still think there's pushback?
No, I do see it opening up. I really do. Bobby knows this about me. I long ago stopped liking to, I don't like to be spoke of as a woman sports executive, right? Like I face the same, more or less the same business challenges as my male colleagues, right? But I would tell you, I've seen, again, to my point about transition, I've seen more accelerated change in the last couple of years than I saw in all the years prior to that. Bobby knows there were many, many, many years where I sat in rooms where I was the only woman, both internally and externally. That is rarely the case today. I think there are women in front offices. We represent some top women coaches who one of them is now coaching in the WNBA, but she was an assistant coach for an NBA team. I think you're going to see more of that. I mean, listen, I'll be really happy with honestly, with the first NBA or NHL or NFL team where the head of business operations and sports operations are two women. But I would say alongside women, I think just more diversity across the board. I have an expectation of that. I never, ever, I don't limit my conversation to gender. I really want to see more representation from underrepresented groups across all the business operations of sports. But I'm optimistic, Bobby. I am. I mean, I'm generally an optimistic person, but again, I've seen more acceleration in the last couple of years than I saw in all the many, many years before that. And thank goodness.
Well, I think, the nature of the business, not just in terms of the social changes of broader representation, I think it finally accelerated awareness of diversity, equity, inclusion across all businesses. I think we're seeing so many changes due to technology and an awareness, but at the end of the day, for those of us in the sports world, people still want their sports, and it's still great content, and there's still a value to being the one to have it and to present it. And I know you're there doing it all the time, which is great. And I would just like to say that before I sign off with my announcement about people joining the Sports Lawyers Association by going to sportslaw.org, et cetera, and all of that, in closing, I would just, first of all, like to thank you for taking the time to be here, and to let everyone know that in my fairly long career working with a lot of people, I know very few people that can hold a candle to you as a lawyer, as a business executive, and above all, with not just your work, but all that you do and the pro bono efforts you do, whether it's with the LA Housing or whoever. You're an even better person than you are a lawyer and a business executive. And so I thank you for taking the time to be with us today, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you, Bobby. I really appreciate it. And thank you all for having me. And I'll do it. Let me say that for the record, if Bobby asked me to do something, I say yes. So thank you for having me, and happy to do it again for you, Bobby, anytime.
Thanks, Sharon. Give my best to the boys at home.
I will. Thanks all.
Bye-bye.
See you soon.